Hey friends, Allison Ramirez here, Christian author, editor, and content creator, here today with a brand new video. This is the first time I'm going to attempt a story read aloud. These are super fun. I see these happen sometimes at writer retreats where authors will come on and read a short snippet from one of their books. So today I'm going to be reading a little bit from The Divided Kingdom. This is the debut fiction novel of mine. This is a dystopian science fiction novel. It's also loosely inspired by the divided kingdom of Israel in the Old Testament, hence the title. So I'll start by reading you the back blurb of the book. So it begins. Adeline Rye, she's my main character, adores books, history, and art, but feels unseen in a society that values advancements in technology and medicine above all else. With her father as the leader of their island civilization called Mir, she has little room for error. So to ensure peace and eliminate violence, the islanders are divided across 3 separate communities, hence the dividing wall you see on the front. And they're forced to abide by the 613 laws that were given to their leadership by the originator. 40 years prior, the originator guided their people to the safety of their island at a time when lawless raiders pillaged and burned their homeland. So that's a little bit about their history and how they arrived to the island. When Adeline, with the help of her 2 best friends, begins to question the community divisions and the 613 laws they live by, she is met with opposition at seemingly every turn. In her quest for answers, she meets Cade, my other protagonist, who is experiencing a complicated reality of his own. Together, they work to unravel the secrets behind the island kingdom of Mir and discover what it means to be truly seen. So that's my main character, Adeline, and the wall that is dividing their people. So we're going to go ahead and jump right into the read aloud. I'm going to switch screens so I can put in various pictures of the scenes that I am going to be reading in the book. We're back, and I have on my screen the opening pages to The Divided Kingdom, the book that I'm going to be doing a read aloud for today. You can see this is my title page, my copyright page. This has all the other books that I've written in ways to contact me. The dedication is that this book is written for all who feel invisible. I'm just going to briefly read the acknowledgement section because I think this is kind of fun. Gives you some context and history behind why I wrote the book. So it all started when I was 14 years old. The main characters, Cade and Adeline, came to life in my imagination as the invisible boy and the girl who could see him. Nearly 4 years and 100,000 words later, I completed the manuscript as a high school senior, which was then titled The Mir That Divides Us. Thank you to my mom, who read that early draft and helped me see the story in new ways so I could be open to the promptings of the Holy Spirit. In so doing, I allowed these characters and their world to mature and expand with time. The manuscript then sat untouched for about 5 years until finally, nearly 10 years after the initial idea, I returned to Cade and Adeline. This book emerged at the start of a new series. Thank you also to my dear husband, Nathan, who has helped me with brainstorming, supporting and standing by me when I wanted to throw in the towel, which was very often. Thank you also to my many alpha and beta readers. This is my first fiction book, so I thank you for your grace and patience with me as a new author. Most of all, thank you to Elroy, the God who saw me in my desire to write this story and who invited me into the great mystery that is the sacred. Amen. Okay, I'm gonna, well, actually, I could read you the author's note too, because this is telling you a little bit more about the biblical side behind the series. So The Divided Kingdom, it's based loosely on the Old Testament narrative of the divided kingdom of Israel, which you can read in 2 Kings, 2 Chronicles, and in the accounts of many of the prophets who lived through the time of the division. The divided kingdom marked a point in the Jewish history where the Israelite people began to see corrosion in their once wise King Solomon. Earlier in the Bible, the Israelites had asked God to give them a king. While God he warned them of the risks, he still granted their request. They were then given Saul first, then David and Solomon, each king gifted and grievous in his own way. In 1 Kings, the kingdom of Israel splits into two when Solomon's son, Rehoboam, ascends the throne following his father's death. Rehoboam yielded to the counsel not of the wise, but of the wicked, who encouraged him to treat the Jewish people with even greater harshness than his father, Solomon, had. Jeroboam, who was an attendant to Solomon, led the Jewish people in a revolt against the new king Rehoboam. This results in the division of the once unified 12 tribes of Israel. As a result, Jeroboam takes 10 tribes to the north, while Rehoboam takes the 2 remaining tribes to the south and renames them as the people of Judah. Though the kingdom in the south did a better job remaining faithful to the covenant, because they still had access to the temple, centered in Jerusalem, with Davidic kings on the throne, the Babylonians eventually defeat them. It's an enemy group, and sends the south into exile in a series of 3 major deportations. After 70 years in exile, it's the Persians who come and defeat the Babylonians, and King Cyrus of the Persians allows the people to return back to their homeland, which is Jerusalem. The 10 tribes in the north, unfortunately, who were with Jeroboam, fared far worse. After having completely abandoned their covenant relationship with God, they create their own religion, and then an enemy group called the Assyrians overtakes them, destroys the temple, and scatters them forever, never to return to the promised land. So this is sort of a modern take on that story with some dystopian science fiction elements. So without further ado, let's get started with Chapter 1. Chapter 1. Let nothing disturb you, let nothing frighten you. All things are passing. St. Teresa of Avila. Adeline drew in a tentative breath as the late afternoon wind settled over her face, revitalizing her skin from the moment it kissed her flushed cheeks. She could feel its strength as it breezed through her clothes and hair. Inhabiting a life of its own, the wind drifted, pressing gently at her back, encouraging her to approach the dividing wall separating the city from the suburbs. She swallowed before taking a few more steps across the hard asphalt. There were no trees or floral life of any kind to be seen as she halted before the massive wall on the city side. She didn't glance behind her to the tall steel buildings in the distance, staple markers of the city. Instead, her gaze climbed the smooth concrete wall before her, the full height reaching well above her head and spanning for miles in either direction. She had made sure to be standing not just before the wall itself, but the gate leading through, the only entry and exit point in the city. Glancing down to the square keypad before the gate, she typed the entry sequence with ease. Immediately, she blew out a breath. The code Miss Malt had given her all those months before had not yet been deactivated by leadership. The automated system triggered the steel bars to rise, revealing a big green hill overlooking small suburban homes pressed all too close together. "You first," she whispered, letting the wind barrel through to the other side as she slipped in after. She waited for the gate to come down thoroughly behind her before stepping out into the open grass. Better that no one know she was here. Brushing her thick auburn braid over her shoulder, Adeline turned her face to the path of the wind, which now danced freely across the indigo skies opening over the small suburban community below. Adeline allowed herself a slight smile before bending to untie the laces of her black ankle boots. She had made it to the other side of the wall. Stepping out of tight shoes and tossing off socks felt freeing, like stripping off unnecessary weight. Finally, out of the compression of the city, she breathed in the earthly green grass beneath her feet, scrunching her bare toes into the loose soil. The quaint community homes were a breath of fresh air, just at the bottom of the sloping hill, not more than 100 yards from where she stood. The windows of the little homes seemed to blink up at her expectantly as the waning light from the late afternoon sun reflected off them. While those in the city were finishing up work for the week, taking every available opportunity to clock yet one more achievement, one more contribution to society, here she was, a young woman of 22, out gallivanting like a carefree child, where one world touched the next. Adeline felt a shiver of excitement rush down her back. After weeks of deliberating, hemming and hawing over the odds of getting caught, she had finally said to misery with it. She was going back through the gate, and that was that. As she stood, appreciating the little homes below from her place at the top of the hill, the smell of pine needles and fresh linen filled her sinuses as the early autumn air bathed her in a memory from the previous fall, shrugging into a knee-length emerald green coat before her parents' bathroom mirror. Her mother stood behind her, only a hair taller, but Adeline had long since stopped growing and thus could never hope to match her, knotting one of her scarves around Adeline's neck. Adeline pursed her lips at this recollection, shaking loose blades of grass from her toes. Do I want to let this memory in? She thought. Adeline paused, staring instead down the green hill, knowing she should just let the past be the past. Adeline shook her head, letting the wind sail around her and whisk any semblance of the seed of memory away. She checked once for the presence of any representatives who might be nearby, though she doubted they would be patrolling an otherwise empty hill, then moved from where she had been paralyzed on the slope between the city and the suburbs. This was the present moment, she reminded herself. This was what she had come for. Without a further moment's hesitation, she took off, letting herself revel in the run, falling fast and bracing her toes against the rich green grass to keep herself from tumbling. There was so little grass in the city that the thick, sloping green of the hill was both a welcome sight and touch, if only to feel the tickle of the lush blades beneath her virgin feet that hardly ever exposed themselves bare and vulnerable to the earth. This moment was enough. It was worth the half-truths to her father about where she occasionally disappeared to in the late afternoons at the end of a long week, sorting books at the one and only library on their island. As Adeline hurtled barefoot down the hill, gulping in the open air and finding it hard to breathe, yet little caring, with the wind rushing her lungs, she longed not for a memory, but for a presence. As much as she had worked day by day for months to force the feeling down, she yearned for her mother behind her once more, soft hands on her shoulders, her lovely face reflecting in the mirror, their eyes connecting in a shared understanding of love. If only Adeline had known that fall morning, picking out scarves together before the bathroom mirror, like any other day, was the last time she would have her mother in her fullness. If only she had known the promised dinner between them that evening would never come. Perhaps, if she had known, she would have been more present, not wasting those final precious moments caught up in petty things like disputes with her father. Okay, I'm going to pause there from the read aloud and show you my website. If you enjoyed this snippet of The Divided Kingdom and you want to read more or learn more about this series, you can check out my website at author-allison-ramirez.com. This is actually a video interview I had with the founder of Legend Fiction regarding this series. This is going to be a trilogy, and the third book is coming out at the end of next year. There's also the sequel to The Divided Kingdom, The Exile, which is already out for purchase. And then here's where you can learn more about The Divided Kingdom, the book that you just heard me read about. There is a link to purchase a copy, which also comes with a character art bookmark that a friend of mine designed. And you can also read some reviews of what others thought about the book. So thank you for listening today. I hope you enjoyed this read aloud, and I'll try to do some more in the future. They're a lot of fun. Take care. Happy Advent.